There, I am excited to share another research review with you today, and it's all about hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, or EDS, hypermobility spectrum disorders, and central sensitization, a very hard thing for me to say, apparently. So we're going to dive right into this article, and I just want to say welcome. If we haven't met, my name is Julie Hirschberg. I am a neurologic physical therapist. I am the owner and founder of Reactive Therapy and Wellness, and actually we are part of the core network for EDS, which is Centers of Excellence in EDS. So this is a topic that is really near and dear to me, and I'm wearing our new reactive gear. We are newly in El Segundo in an amazing transdisciplinary treatment space, and we're in the Los Angeles area. I got to wear a skirt today after I taught at USC today, and it was so warm. I couldn't believe it. So anyway, I'm pretty stoked on that today. And welcome. Hey, Amy, I just wanted to say hi to you. So let me share the study that I wanted to review today. This is called Exploring Signs of Central Sensitization in Adolescents with Hypermobility Spectrum Disorder, or hypermobile EDS. This was published in 2024 in the European Journal of Pain. And a couple of weeks ago, I reached out to you all. I had all of these articles that I had been reading and looking at, and you all voted on articles that you wanted me to talk about. So also, thank you for that. This was one of them, and so I'm excited to finally talk about this. This is, by the way, from a group in Sweden. So I always think about, like, who are people that are being studied, and this is a group of adolescents in Sweden. So let's go into a little bit of the background here, because people had asked me questions regarding this, and I think this is really important to get started. First, people were like, well, what is central sensitization anyway? And this is a term that I will say kind of gets thrown around a little bit, but is used to describe some of the pathophysiology of many different disorders. So for example, at USC, I teach in our neuropathology class, which is a course for physical therapy students, all about the pathologies of the nervous system. And we talk about what happens in different diseases. And so last week, we had the amazing Lori Ganoza give a lecture on headache, including migraine. And migraine, part of the process of what occurs in migraine is actually central sensitization. And so, but to those questions, I had folks ask, what does this really mean? And there's a really great group. It's oh boy, I'm going to forget what it stands for. It's IASP. And it's maybe the International Association for the Study of Pain. I may not have gotten that quite right, but they have some really great publications and definitions of these. So I wanted to read you one. Let me pull it up here. Central sensitization. So this was originally described by somebody, the last name Wolf, in 1983, and defined as increased responsiveness of nociceptive neurons in the central nervous system to their normal or subthreshold afferent input. So that's a lot of words. But essentially increased neuronal activity in the central nervous system. So that's the brain, the brainstem, the spinal cord, the cerebellum. And they have increased responsiveness to what would be just a normal or even sub-threshold sensory input. So a light touch might light up some of these nociceptive neurons, where normally that would never be lit up by a light touch. So this is something that we see in many disorders. So as I mentioned, migraine is one of them. But this group was really looking at what is the role, or what are the signs of central sensitization in people with hypermobility spectrum disorders or hypermobile EDS. Now, this is really important because people with EDS experience a lot of pain. That's not news to anybody with EDS or anybody that treats them. This is very common. This is what we see a lot. So let's go into the background here of why they did this study. So first of all, EDS, common in adolescents, more common in women than men, and it is disabling for a lot of people. And that disability includes a lot of multifactorial things, including fatigue, including weakness. People, kids and adolescents also experience less ability to participate in things like school and social activities. A lot of times because of pain. And pain is one of the main reasons that people with EDS or HSD, hypermobility spectrum disorders, seek medical care and treatment. That's the primary reason our clinic sees people with these disorders as well. So central sensitization has been proposed as one part, I would say, of the explanation. There are very good reasons that people with hypermobility would experience pain due to injuries and joint dislocations and poor proprioception. There are many things that are both peripheral in the body as well as central in the brain. But they wanted to look at, or one of the proposed theories of why there might be widespread pain is that the central sensitization. Boy, I'm having a hard time saying that word. Central sensitization might be occurring. Now, I just saw a question here, and I want to make sure I get to questions as well. Why do I see many with CRPS and these other issues? So I'm not sure if you're seeing CRPS and these other diagnoses. So maybe you can clarify if seeing people with CRPS and pain and hypermobility and all of these, or some of the other comorbid conditions. I will say this is common in our practice as well. We might see folks with CRPS and we screen and find they also have hypermobility or they also have POTS. And I would suggest that it may be the hypermobility, and then, usually CRPS is occurring after an injury as well. That is probably pre-existing the CRPS and contributing to the development of the CRPS. So if you're seeing those pieces together, it's not surprising. We see it as well. And I would say it's very likely that some of those pieces that are systemic, autonomic, sensory, related to the hypermobility may have contributed and led to the cause of CRPS. This overlap with central sensitization is one of those pieces as well, I would say. Which, by the way, for all of that, Amy, I know you're here and you're in Brain Bites. Tonight, in our Brain Bites group, which is our mentoring and learning group for physical therapists, occupational therapists, psychologists, speech therapists who are kind of like-minded in treating the whole person with a complex condition. We have our live session tonight, and it's on managing flares in these centralized pain conditions. So I'm super excited about that. Brittany Kim and Malia Sacco are our two PT/OT presenters tonight, and I cannot wait. This is a very hot topic, and goes along really well because we can see massive flares of pain in the people that we are working with with EDS. And, you know, one of the questions is central sensitization a part of that? So one of the things that we look at is in the brain and body is pain inhibition. And this often occurs after exercise. So in a healthy person, if they do physical activity, it usually has an inhibitory effect on pain. And this is known as, I hadn't really heard of this term, to be honest. That idea, yes, but this term, exercise-induced hypoalgesia, meaning after a single episode of exercise, they've studied this quite a bit, people have increased pain tolerance, higher thresholds. And this can be really helpful for people. I will say this is really helpful for me personally. I've shared with many people, I have a chronic autoimmune condition called rheumatoid arthritis. Activity and exercise improve my pain. But that is not the case for everybody. And one of the things that they were looking at in the study is, do people with EDS have that same exercise-induced hypoalgesia or not? And maybe is the pain even worse, right? And so they were looking at this potential of indicating that there's a central sensitization. Now, it's really hard to say, you know, one positive test equals central sensitization. So I do think that's a limitation in most studies. Pain is just not that simple. It's so multifactorial. So what did they do? They got two groups of people. They got adolescents with hypermobility spectrum disorders and hypermobile EDS, and then they got folks without those. And this is great, right? So that they can compare their responses on their test. And let's see. They had a pretty strong group of people. I think I can actually share this table here. I think this is the study population. I know it's teeny tiny, but what you can see is that the average age was 15 or 16 for both groups. They give the Baton score, which was an average of 6, and they had 37 people in the group with hypermobility and 47 people in the control group. Not too bad, I think. Then they did the experimental protocol. It included questionnaires, by the way, and this was an important piece. They wanted to look at fatigue. They wanted to look at anxiety, depression, how the person was experiencing their pain so that they could compare the two groups as well. They did body charts of pain localization. I know we see this a lot in therapy. People fill out a body chart. But they did this test. So I want to describe the test here for you. And I'm kind of pulling this up. So they did a test of what they would say is a test of central sensitization. And this has been studied before on this, and I would just question if this is like entirely central sensitization. But I think that is like the issue in the brain in general and the body, is kind of pinpointing that one test measures one massive thing that is very complex and a lot of nervous system connections. But I know it's research and you kind of have to pick one test. So this is a test that's been done before, and they do pressure on different muscles, and they look at what is a person's threshold for pain. It actually sounds like really not very fun to do. So I'm like, wow, kudos to you for getting a large group of people to do this study, to be poked until they were like, stop. So as soon as a person experienced pain, they could say stop. They did it in the trapezius muscle, They did it in the deltoid muscle, they did it in the paraspinals of the back, and they did it in the tibialis anterior. Then, so they got the threshold at that level. Then they did a bike test, so a bike exercise test, much like some of the exercise tolerance tests that we would typically do, where they're doing 50 RPMs and then it's increasing every minute with some resistance, and they would go up to 75% of their max heart rate. Now, this is just a side note, but something I thought was pretty cool is the folks with EDS and the folks without EDS actually had very similar heart rates on the exercise test, and length of exercising. It was a little smaller in the folks with EDS. And I found that interesting, just because we also know there's a high overlap with autonomic dysfunction in EDS. And it kind of made me wonder, did this subgroup not experience some of that? But they didn't even talk about that. That was just like my own thought thinking about it. So what were the results? So let me give you a result table here. If I can get the right one, we will see. That is not the one that I really wanted. That one was the results of some of the surveys. I think this is the one. I know it's really tiny, but this is where they looked at the levels of exercise-induced hypoalgesia, comparing the group with hypermobility to the control group without hypermobility. And essentially what they found is that initially the p-value is on the right side. So they're looking for a p-value of less than 0.01. And the initial pain threshold was really only significant in one of the muscle groups. So the trapezius muscle, this is without exercise. But the exercise, after exercise component was significant in the trapezius muscle and the tibialis anterior. Now, it was significantly different from the control group, meaning the control group had more exercise-induced hypoalgesia, so less pain, a higher threshold is what I get really confused when I use the term threshold, because like lower is worse, right? Higher is better. Anyway, I hope I said that the right way. But anyway, less pain. However, this is the what I would say kind of the good news is that they didn't really find that people with EDS, the pain got worse. They just had barely better. Some people got worse, but it was a very, very small difference. And I actually think that's kind of good. But it was different than the control group, right? So I think, like, for example, if you look at the bottom, the group with EDS had 0.33 difference with a range of a negative 0.31 to 1.22, and the control group had a 1.30 difference. So it's like that exercise-induced hypoalgesia didn't really exist in the group with EDS. It did exist in the control group, and that was significantly different. So I know that is kind of a lot. So what exactly does that mean? So I'll stop sharing the results here. So let's talk about kind of big picture pieces when it comes to understanding EDS and understanding what might be, so especially for my clinician friends here, what might be contributing to somebody's symptoms? I think the big message here is that when it comes to EDS, we need to look at the body and the brain. We can't ignore that brain changes might be contributing to somebody's experience in their body. We also can't ignore their body, right? So it's not all one or the other. We've got to look at the whole picture. We can support somebody in their body and we can support their brain. There's a lot that we can do for central sensitization. So that is one piece that I think is really important because, I think about this. Again, I teach at the University of Southern California. I teach a neuropathology course about diseases of the nervous system. Connective tissue disorders are not in my course. They're not diseases of the nervous system. However, as we've talked about in other live videos, as we have seen day after day in our clients, these connective tissue changes and maybe the nature of hypermobility is having a great effect on the brain. And the brain effect is contributing to symptoms. And they have a body that might not be doing what it's supposed to be doing. So we need to treat both pieces and we need to treat them together. That is my biggest take home for clinicians. So here are big three. So central sensitization and again, this was just in adolescents. That's probably one of the biggest groups that we see with EDS. Those folks did have increased pain sensitivity to pressure compared to their peers. That is important to know. That also is not surprising at all because that's what I see all of the time. And that might be due to central sensitization, where, and again, central sensitization is this process where the nervous system and those neurons for pain signals are really amplified. Now, we also know there's peripheral mechanisms, but perhaps there's a central sensitization going on. We also found in this study exercise, and this was in other studies as well, exercise normally reduces pain, but this response is blunted. It's less in people with hypermobility disorders. Again, clinicians who love to prescribe exercise, which I'm not saying don't prescribe exercise, it can be so very helpful. We might think about doing it differently in EDS. And hypermobility spectrum disorders because the pain response, the pain improvement with exercise might not be quite the same. It might be blunted. People might need more exercise. They might need different types of exercise, right? I mean, I won't even talk about how just riding on a stationary bike for an exercise test sounds so boring. I would not like to do that either. It might actually cause me pain because it's so boring. But this is a controlled study. This is what they did. Personally, I think all exercise should be fun. So that's another story. But when we are personalizing a rehab plan for a person, we need to take into account that exercise might not provide some of the same pain relieving benefits. Now, I would also venture to guess the way a person exercises with hypermobility may need to be different. We may need to be supporting their joints. Like maybe they shouldn't have done that bike test without a little compression at their knees, for example, right? So we should be thinking about those things to have people exercise. So that's number 2. The third, and this was the last table that I just had pulled up really quickly, and not surprising because we do see this, is that the teens with hypermobility compared to the control teens had a much higher fatigue level. They had higher pain levels, anxiety, and depression. compared to the controls. Now, I reviewed a really interesting study a while back about some of the links between hypermobility and autism and proprioception and the experience of anxiety that are so very interesting and really blew my mind. You'll have to go back and check those out on our page. I want to say it was like around February. There's a lovely, I'm drawing a blank on her name. I think it's Eccles, Eccles. But a really great researcher from the UK who is doing this work and really finding the links between these that are so much more profound than a person with EDS just having anxiety. It really might be joint proprioception causing or contributing to some of that experience. So once again, clinicians, we should be attending and addressing and supporting somebody in their body and joint proprioception. We should be treating that and helping a person with resources to improve that. This goes without saying that kind of zooming out for the whole person, really considering their brain, really considering their body, and supporting them where it's needed. This highlights for us the need for multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary care for our adolescents with EDS and hypermobility, because we do know that interventions on various levels can be really helpful for central sensitization. Now, if you are like many of the folks that I have met or have worked with who are like, yeah, I think maybe my nervous system is really sensitive. It's not just pain. So this can be, central sensitization can be that sensitivity to light, to sound, to taste, to smells, to textures. All of those things are in the realm of central sensitization, and that's not just pain. So if you were like, oh, this doesn't really apply to me, well, hello, central nervous system and the sensitivity of the central nervous system. We know that many lifestyle factors go into this. This is where our occupational therapists are incredible at working with a person and kind of breaking those pieces down to, it's not that they're treating central sensitization, they're helping the person find what their brain and body needs to really raise that threshold threshold. So they're not so bombarded with all that sensory stimuli and really overwhelmed by it. Thank you very much, OTs. Thank you, psychologists that help decipher some of the stress factors that might be contributing to that as well. And thank you to PTs who can look at the brain, can look at the body together. And this is like my plea to clinicians to zoom out and look at the whole person and really not treat things in isolation. So enough of my soapbox there. I see a couple of comments. So yeah, and if you have questions or comments, somebody did send a question that I will get to. It's about graded motor imagery. So Ratcatcher3, well, that's an interesting name. I wish more clinicians understood this and knew how to help. Joint proprioception and anxiety. I know this is about adolescents, but still a problem as adults. Yes, it's frequently diagnosed in adolescents, right? But we see a lot of adults because of what they suggest for anxiety. Thank you for saying this. And this was part of my discussion when I talked about that other article, is a lot of folks with EDS, with POTS, feel anxious, and as do many other humans, right? But they feel anxious. And some of these studies have suggested that the physiology of that anxiety, it's it's an autonomic type physiology, might actually be coming from the poor proprioception, not necessarily, gosh, what do I want to say? Like, in many ways, we're trying to like say anxiety's over here and it's a mental health disorder, and then like proprioception and sensation are over here and they're a separate thing. They're really not, right? It's more that like our brain is listening to our body is listening to our brain. We should stop like trying to separate those things. But some of the, to your point, Ratcatcher 3, I love that name. Thank you so much for being here. To your point, some of the, what I would say, traditional treatments for anxiety may really go awry. Treating and addressing the sensory needs and proprioceptive needs could take away anxiety for people. Now, I'm not suggesting at all this is like a magic pill, but I am suggesting, hello, clinicians, don't be one-dimensional here. Anxiety is not anxiety. It's not all the same for every person. We should understand a person's sensory needs for sure. And as Ratcatcher 3 also says, just contributes to problems rather than help, because it's a different kind of anxiety cause, I guess. Yes, indeed. It is. Not all anxiety is the same. That is a brilliant insight. Thank you so much for sharing it. And as we saw in this article today, again, let me just bring up the name of it just so you can grab it. I'll include it in our newsletter as well. Exploring signs of central sensitizations in adolescents with hypermobility spectrum disorder or hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. This was from the European Journal of Pain in 2024, and gives us some insight into what might be happening in the brain. And again, a big take home for our clinicians is, let's zoom out. Let's look at the whole picture. Let's look at the brain and the body. And for my fellow Brain Bites members, this is exactly what we are doing tonight. We've got the fantastic PTOT duo talking about pain flares and the role of the brain and lifestyle and all of these pieces. So I cannot wait for that. If you are a Brain Bites member, those are clinicians in our mentoring and learning community. That is tonight. It is in like 30 minutes. So I'm going to be going to that, and I cannot wait. If you are a clinician, if you're a clinician like me, if you're a clinician like others that really, really cares about understanding the big picture when it comes to pain, when it comes to EDS, when it comes to POTS, when it comes to F&D, concussion, MS, Parkinson's, stroke, all of those pieces. If you're one of those, I want to say weirdos like me that really care about that, our Brain Bites community will be opening soon. And we are only opening once a year. And we are this kind of small and mighty group of people that deeply, deeply care about these disorders and want to get more curious and then really like blaze a trail to help more people. And so if that is you, you should be on our priority list so you can be the first to hear about this. You can sign up at reactiveeducation.com/brainbites. Get on our priority list. We're going to be doing a really cool sensory boot camp coming up. So stay tuned for that. And I want you to be the first to know. I don't want you to miss out if you're a clinician like that, because you are going to feel at home with our group of clinicians. They are amazing. But if you are a patient or clinician and not already on our newsletter, I'll send out the links to all of our videos this week, as I do every single week. You can simply go to reactivept.com and sign up for our newsletter there if you're a patient, or reactiveeducation.com as a clinician. Thank you so much for caring about this like I do. And please keep sending your comments, your suggestions, your questions my way. And I'll continue to share what I'm reading and doing. Thanks so much and have a good night.